Healthy Living. My name is Cheryl McWilliams, and I will be with you today. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Galen Johnson. Dr. Johnson is a surgeon who has actually worked with myself and Parkview Adventist Medical Center for years now, specifically with me involving a program called Lifestyle Choices that looks at chronic disease and prevention and that sort of thing. And several years ago, he began doing a program with us called Fit or Frail that's looking at life expectancy, how long we are currently living, how long we could live, and how we could live a little bit better. So those are some of the topics that we're going to be covering today with Dr. Johnson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I understand that in terms of life expectancy, we've kind of gotten a little bit better over the past 1,000 years or so. How has that progressed?
Well, in the past, life expectancy was much shorter than it is today. 1,000 years ago, life expectancy was about 20 years. And the reason for that was infections and epidemics and war and infant mortality and so forth. So if you were born 1,000 years ago, you might live to be an old person, but your chances were not nearly what they are today. Right. That improved until about 1900. The life expectancy had gone to about 47 years. But still, there were a lot of the same kind of problems. There was 100 years ago, infection still took a lot of people. If you look at some of the graveyards around older areas, such as we live here in Maine, you'll find them on occasion where there are whole families that lost several children, epidemic of typhoid fever or things of that kind, whooping cough even. And some of those things we have now overcome by sanitation or by vaccines and so on. But, and things now are even better as far as overall life expectancy. The average expectancy for a man now is about 84 years.
Wow.
For a woman is 86, because we've taken away some of the risks as far as infectious disease and things of that kind. But now what we have found that we now have a whole new series of problems that they didn't have so much before, and that's degenerative diseases, what we call them. Degenerative diseases are things such as cancer and heart disease and things of that kind. And which brings about another very interesting idea, and that is, for a long time people have been wondering, well, how long is it possible to live anyway? What's the maximum life expectancy that I could have?
What is it?
Well, no one knows for sure, but we think, or not we, but the medical profession, those who look at this sort of thing, think that possibly the person on average could live to be, or the maximum possible life expectancy could be around 120 years.
Wow.
Now, the interesting thing is, if that's the maximum any of us can live, there is nothing we can do to prolong that. I mean, we all eventually will die. We can't extend that, but we have a lot of ways of shortening it, and that's the problem.
Well, our birth certificate doesn't come with an expiration date on it.
No, it does not. And so we find that the choices we make have a lot to do with how long we expect to live. And as I mentioned, the reason we know that probably 120 years is not a bad figure to look at as far as the possible, because there have been people in our recent life, in their recent lives, have lived to be that long. There was a lady in France whose name was Jean. She lived until she was 122.
Wow.
There was another one, Shigeko in Japan, who lived to be 120. So we know this is possible, but as I said, the average life expectancy is shorter than that. A lot of people do reach 100 years old, by the way, more and more people. In fact, as I think the latest count around 2000 was, there's about 150,000 people who have reached 100 years of age.
Wow.
Now that comes as a real surprise to some people. They don't intend to live that long. And so it does give us some reason to look at our lives and perhaps do some planning about that, because we may live longer than we think.
So certainly, as I'm getting older, I've got a ways to go yet, but every day we're all getting older. I'm looking at my parents my grandparents and realizing that they're getting older. Some of them are getting older well. Some of them are getting older not so well. Mm-hmm. So the concept of being fit or frail as we grow older, what good is it to live a long time if I live a long time sick? Maybe there's some things that I can do to live a long time and live well.
Dr. Walter Bortz wrote a book entitled Dare to be 100, and he takes up some of these things. And he said, you know, we live too short and die too long. That was the way he puts it. And unfortunately, even though we are living longer, sometimes those last 8 or 10 years are not fun years, depending upon the health that we experience. In fact, as we know that probably there's around 15% of women will live to be over 90, and about 4% of men at this point. So how we order our lives has a lot to do with you know, our life expectancy and the kind of enjoyment we want to have. To live a long time is good. To live and feel well for a long time is better. Yes. And that's the object that we want to strive for. I might just say that there are a number of different areas that determine that for us, and this is what we need to look at as far as the kind of life we're going to experience. Dr. Bortz has broken this down into some interesting examples of the things that we may face during life. And there are about 4 factors that he uses to determine you know, how long we're going to live and what expectancy that's going to be. The first one he calls blueprint. You know, a lot of people say, well, my father lived to be 90 and my mother lived to be 95 and my grandparents were older people too. And therefore I feel pretty good about the fact that I'm going to live that long. Mm-hmm. Well, I hate to disillusion anyone, but actually looking at statistics, it would indicate that probably the length of our life probably is going to be defined only by about 10 to 15% by the length of life of our grandparents. Really? Or our parents.
Okay.
Most of the factors have to do with what we do. I mentioned the first one is blueprint. That has to do with your grandparents. The next one is what they call the lightning factor. Okay. Lightning has to do with things that you don't expect. I mean, all of us can be hit by a car, right, or people are killed in accidents or war or some unforeseen thing, cancer on occasion. Even though we know that most cancers are preventable, sometimes a certain percentage of them are not. And then there's the factor of time. No one lives forever. We all have, you know, the cutoff time. We don't know what our bodies are programmed to live. And then the last one has to do with the choices that we make. And here I think is the biggest factor. In fact, as we now know that probably 80% of the kind of life we live is going to be determined by the choices we make.